Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for the invitation. We're excited to be here, and thank you for the introduction. And we will continue with introduction. First of all, maybe it's important to translate the organization we are coming from. So, išgirsti or išgirsti, it doesn't matter how you will pronounce it because it has two different meanings depending on where you put the stress on. So, išgirsti would mean those who are hurt, and išgirsti, to hear. So, it's this double play, and it's a broader umbrella of different activities of our organization. Today we will talk more about the Queer Archive initiative, but also išgirsti encompasses Queer Festival Kreivės. We just had 11th edition in September. It mostly focuses on queer cinema, but also we organize queer party, queer readings, and usually we introduce queer magazine that we will talk a bit more later.
Yeah, so the Kreivės Vilnius Queer Festival is also we say that it's a space actually. So for us, it's important with all our initiatives to create this safe space or safer space. I don't know. But yeah, safe space as a concept for queer community to meet, to share, to get support, to find friends, to connect, and so on. So the cultural stuff we do, the main thing is actually connecting through culture. So the cultural things, and yeah, not culture on itself, but culture as a social factor, as a connecting factor, as a socializing space as well. So Kreivės, so we try different concepts. It's once a year as a festival, but for a few days. But usually we have events throughout the year. So different things, parties, screenings, also not only in Vilnius, in Kaunas now as well, for a few years. But the initiatives actually, like the umbrella išgirsti became an umbrella quite recently. Before, the organization was called differently, so we had two directions. So one was išgirsti, the other one was Vilnius Queer Festival Kreivės. And then these two initiatives started coinciding a lot and then for us it was like, which one we should choose? Whether it's like, is it a festival? Is it more like a festival, or is it more like space or other, like išgirsti, like archive and stuff. So it's like, so it became a matter of choice. So basically išgirsti became a larger umbrella at that point, but organization exists for 20 years already. In the beginning it wasn't solely queer. It became queer in 2014, so it's 11 years now. But yeah, but it was created as a peer educational network. So talk about sexuality, about human rights. But then we made it queer, more queer at some point. So that's more of a history, but like we can confirm that the introduction was right. So we have a space, a small space in Vilnius we run. So it's it depends on the time of the week, on the time of the year, what the space is and what it is about. So sometimes it's more like to work for our team and the team meeting space and work on archive. But on Thursdays, it's also a library, a reading room. So we're opening it like as a reading room on Thursdays. We have some screenings. Sometimes it's a gallery. So like we had quite recently one exhibition, but we'll talk a bit more about what we have there throughout these years. So it depends. It's a challenge to change the purpose, and then also we provide psychological support and group meetings as well, but also individual support, psychological support. So like so it's a challenge to change the purpose of the space, or like to organize the space in this way. But we also think it's a huge privilege to have a space in general, and it's unfair to use it only for some things. For instance, as galleries work, we know that most of the galleries are not very well attended throughout apart from the openings. But so usually it's quite an empty space, and it's a big thing to have this space and keep it empty. So for us, it was very important to have this location. It's a small apartment, actually. It's an apartment building, so it's an apartment, but no one lives there. It's used for the organization, and we play with this concept as well. When coming into someone's home, it feels a bit like coming into someone's home at some point. So for us, it's also interesting. Like, people cannot find it in the beginning, and then when they find it, then they feel like coming home. Through our exhibitions, we also work with this concept a bit, making it much more intimate sometimes, and people, queer artists can bring something else when in this specific context, in the specific space, because they dare more. Then the meeting with art is much more intimate sometimes, and somehow more cozy as well. But also sometimes it's this feeling of home makes it a bit uneasy for people to enter in the beginning and to meet the works or artists, and it becomes a bit of intimidating in the beginning, and it becomes a bit too much intimate, I would say, and then but then that also works, how getting to know the art as well, how close you can be, and how close you can be to the artist as well. So that's a more general introduction. I'm not sure if it's not too much already.
We often struggle with time, but the Queer Archive initiative we started 4 years ago out of our own curiosity, historical curiosity, but also as a need to find our own roots, and somehow from the point that you spoke also in the introduction, that in our regions, queer is often read as imported term or even movement, so it's really important to look for our own history and embed ourselves in a bigger historical narrative, to actually maybe sometimes to look for our own heroes. So at the beginning we felt that it's impossible task, so we started to travel around and to travel only in Eastern Europe. So we went we went to Scandinavia because there is funding, yeah. But our biggest I guess interest is in Eastern Europe, and we're very happy also to see Nina here, because we met in Ljubljana in lesbian archive and library, and we find this example also. Help me with the word, because it's about words. Influence, right? And we researched archives in other countries, like in Czech Republic, in Hungary, there was an archive in Belarus and Russia, but obviously these countries are not accessible at the moment, and we don't know about the status of the documents there. And also it's a very important point when we are talking about marginalized histories and about marginalized archives, that they are very fragile, and these stories depend on the regime of the country, because it's very easy to wipe out. That's why queer history is also a complicated topic. Sometimes we need to look for very little traces to be able to reconstruct or to tell even the story. And also the words are changing, the concepts are changing, how people identify themselves, which words they use to talk about themselves are changing. So the task that we took upon is very interesting and requires not only interest but queer methodology to be able to look for it.
Yeah, so for us, taking time, we started in 2020, like the idea of the archive was in the air for quite a while already. But so one of the factors why we couldn't start early, I think, was of that this task is overwhelming. This is something, you sort of become responsible for what, like it's a big question. It seems that in the beginning you become responsible for everything. Like if you call yourself Lithuanian Queer Archive, then it seems in the beginning that, okay, it's like you have to represent all the queers now, or like all the periods, and sometimes we get these questions, but what about this Grand Duke of Lithuania, and about this story, like why don't you write about that? But it's like, for us it was very important to take time to understand where we could place ourselves. That's why this research came in, researching other archives, what has been there, and then we found out that they are like really different, and then like the approaches are very different, but also like it's possible to focus on very different things. You can focus on as little as you want, but also you can focus as wide as you want. So it's and with wide you don't have to cover everything at the end as well. So for instance, this also traveling north helped us to understand how specific the archive can be. So there are these initiatives which are Rosa Bruce, for instance, archive, which is focusing on queer sound. So it's just the sound archive, queer sound archive, or SAKMI, which is archive of Swedish queer moving images. So like it's anything which is moving image and queer. With queer theme, so it's and Swedish, so it's or somehow related to Sweden, and then so it can be that specific, but also can be like the archive in Bergen, which is national Norwegian queer archive. So national means that it gets funding, national funding throughout the years, and that's the type of archive. When we say word archive, people start thinking about, or it's like rolling these rolling shelves and a lot of articles and a lot of things, objects that they collect everything basically, but it's also national. So people trust and they send, and they share the facilities with university. So. And then, so they have these archival spaces, and then they have staff, and they are still understaffed, but they have, I don't know, 10 or 7 people continuously working on that. So it's, so for us it was important to understand what we couldn't be, what we couldn't be, and what we could be, and what that could be an example. I don't know, it's a nice example how a state takes responsibility for safeguarding, for saving things, which is very important. But it's difficult to imagine that could happen sometime very soon in here. Like in here, I mean the ball, the ball. So it's so that's why it was also very important to look at this region. Say.
But the beginning is always, I guess, similar in different. Sorry. We started from magazines.
Yes.
Kur?
Magazines.
Sorry.
Let's go to magazines.
Aš jau buvau tada.
Just here. Yeah. So what we could do in the beginning.
So we went to the library and we digitized what they had. It's not with basically without proper permission from the editors, and we uploaded all the magazines of the 90s that we found to our website. With queer topics, it's always a bit complicated, and we received a bit of resistance from other LGBT organizations because there is a growing interest in such topics, and for them it's a treasure that can be bought, and not everyone wants to put them online.
Yes, so you can go to our website. I think you can look through them. It's all in Lithuanian, but it's quite. So there are PDFs as well. And then who needs a higher resolution, we also can send them in cooperation. But and then there is also video about this interview, and then how. So it coincided a bit for us. Like we also had this interview with main editor of magazine, which was very difficult to find as well because he sort of disappeared from the
arena.
Yeah.
Because to be open in the 90s was a bit too complicated. A lot of people afterwards went back to the closet, and they don't want to do anything with public anymore. It was a time where people felt that the freedom is here and they can become very open, but it was not the case.
So we have these magazines, but also for us as an archive, it was very important to take back. One of the tasks we put ourselves in is to take back culture, to take back queer culture, to make it queer or to frame it queer, which is important for us. Sometimes we get discussions, how do you know that someone is queer? But it's for us, it's not the main thing that how this person identified themselves at that time, if the person is not alive anymore. But it's like how queer community can relate to the person if they can find this anchor in the production, cultural production, or in the person. And if it's important for someone to associate themselves with this particular artist, for instance, some personality, it's enough on itself as well. But for instance, we know about some people, some facts, but we don't know how they identify themselves particularly sometimes, but we know that some of the practices or some of lifestyle, whatever, or how they participated in some things, they make them queer for us. So one of the things we started in the beginning was also this Virginijus Šonta exhibition, and it was very important for us to have it in our space as well. So sometimes we get sometimes a question, so you didn't get this larger space to exhibit something, but for us it's not the case. Like we don't want it to be exhibited somewhere else. We want to bring it home, we want to bring it to our home, and then so for us it's important to make these these exhibitions quite intimate, and then to bring these artists, you know, like to us and to community, to bring them back to the community. So it's so we have this exhibition of Virginijus Šonta. Virginijus Šonta is this photographer who was killed in 1992. He was killed just after the independence, and then one of the things we faced with this organizing this exhibition was to whom his works belonged to, like, because he was married, he had a daughter, and then all the things, sort of all the artwork now belongs to them. So we inherited the artwork. They didn't take much care of the artwork for a while. There was this friend of a photographer who was taking care of the archive mainly, but then as interest rose in Virginijus Šonta, then also the family's interest started rising a bit as well, bit by bit. When we wanted to make this exhibition, we got a refusal from the family because they didn't want to these works to be displayed in a queer setting. And then, so it is a big question, and for us it was a choice as well, ethical choice. What do we do if we have this situation? We know that in cultural circles, people knew that he was queer. His photographies, for sure, tell that he was queer. And then we have a situation where the closest people or family doesn't, or no, they don't want to talk about it. So we approached the private museum. They borrowed us works, and then we still displayed them in our setting. And for us it was the choice about this, that queer is never problematic in a way. Like, we cannot approach queerness as problematic thing. For us it's not the point which we want to approach anything queer. So for us it was important to have it, to still have his work in our space and for us and from the community.
Yeah, I guess it's one of the differences from other galleries that we usually need to work with people surrounding the artist. We also did the exhibition of a Lithuanian lesbian poet who died not receiving the decision of European Human Rights Court because her fairy tale book was censored. There was one fairy tale about two princesses loving each other, and after the censorship, she went to European Human Rights Court and unfortunately died of cancer. And when we organized the exhibition, I remember the weekend when Augustas is writing to me, you know, her best friend is approaching us and her mother is alive. So before opening the exhibition, we had to negotiate what to do. We had to invite the mother into the space, because when you say that it's a personal archive, the imagination of people, you know, explodes. What's the personal archive? Will we put, I don't know, diaries on the walls, and what's the ethical approach, especially in these topics? And also people's mind change when they become heroes, right? If the mother was homophobic before, it doesn't mean that right now she's not proud of her daughter who is on, for whom the exhibitions are being organized. But obviously our ethical approach is queer and feminist approach. So we are putting things under the glass. We're not showing things that can be sensitive for us. Usually it's more important to show people as like who they were, not only to emphasize the sexuality. For us, it's one of the common things of human existence anyway. And with the gallery also, we work with contemporary queer artists. We did a few exhibitions for
So this one was also like organized with an artist and so we played, like as you say, we've since the large part of the archive is postcards, so we actually very much divided how the postcards which was sent to Neringa and which we not displayed. So they are accessible for some research purposes, but like they are basically were closed for access. So yes, but we also work with other queer artists.
One other interesting thing that we did, and we also spoke outside while smoking about COVID, just after the COVID, during Queer Feminist Festival, we went interviewing people. I will just mention briefly that we do more interviews with people who lived during the Soviet era to preserve their stories. But we want to show maybe one example from this Queer COVID archive. We did 2-minute short interviews with people where they just tell what they did during COVID and what's Queer COVID experience.
So for introduction, I think also important to tell that how history becomes history now. So like for us, it's very important to not to focus only on the past, which we still can access or cannot access anymore, but like how people really forget what happened right now. So we've actually prepared more things, but and videos, but so probably this is the only one which will screen anyway. So it's fine to record as well. So it's and then we can share other things afterwards.
Hi, my name is A. My pronouns are they and he. Yes, so I picked a photo of me before, after top surgery, because I thought for me the pandemic was kind of, well, it was very challenging in all other aspects, but regarding transition, it was quite convenient. I started my hormone replacement therapy in February 2020. I was then like finishing my studies in France, so that's why I started there. I was like, oh, it's such a good opportunity for me to access this healthcare based on informed consent that's not accessible in Lithuania, and just like explore communities in Paris and think about my future and like think where I want to live. And then the pandemic and lockdown happened, and I kind of had just to live alone in a small room with like 9 square meters under lockdown for 3 months. And then and then I had to go back to Lithuania, but it was quite nice actually to be alone and like notice all the changes like of the hormones, and like just be with myself and not have to go through this I don't know, not to experience like I don't know, transphobia because you don't face people so much. And I remember someone was saying like, oh, it would be so nice if trans people could like for 3 years or so while they're like going through transition and all these changes, like just kind of not have to meet other people so that they don't get like misgendered and just go through uncomfortable experiences. And that was kind of like the pandemic. So that was good, yeah. And I was finishing my studies also online, not in person, which was not as good, but helped with the transphobia aspect. And then I had top surgery already when I was in Lithuania, and I had to well, for a while, like, had a hard time moving, and so, but also the pandemic was a good reason, for example, not to meet my parents for that time period. And I met them like a few weeks after, but I still haven't told them that I had like top surgery and that I'm on hormones. But also it's like, I don't know, like private information. Although I'm sure they noticed, but so it was kind of the fact that there was a reason, and also like this opportunity to just kind of be with yourself for a while. And notice all the changes in your body and just like appreciate them. That was nice. I would say that my like pandemic was like split into different periods. So, like the first one was really just like a solitary experience, and was really not so easy. But it was I think quite spiritual in a way. Because you don't have much space, much things.
Yeah, you got it.
So yeah, there are quite a few interviews here.
They are all in English.
They are all in English as well. So people took browsed through the phone, took a photo, chose a photo, and for them it was also very important thing to go through and think what they have forgotten already. And it was just couple of years ago, and then people already forgotten things. So yeah, so it's more or less like that. We also published a magazine, which Viktorija mentioned about. So one of the issues was devoted to the archiving of the archive. So how we make archive. So we a bit archived what we did in the beginning. So it's also exhibition, but also there is this interview with Natasha, and then other stuff. And we published this magazine to 100 copies, 200 numbered copies, and for us it's important to keep it only in 200 copies, so it wouldn't become trash. And people would be something precious for people to share. And then we encouraged Sappho Fest, this is outside the queer feminist festival, to archive themselves. So we published a publication about that. We also archived 10 years of our Vilnius Queer Festival Kreivės as well. So we have a publication about that. So it also becomes a mean of archiving, and it's also, so little is printed now. So for us, it's also important to have something physical and tangible for people too. So this is more or less like that. It's more than less. We still have some time for discussion afterwards. So thanks.
Thank you so much for your presentation. We continue. We talk later, of course, also at the discussion, and really encourage everyone here to have some questions of their own, which would be great. And before we do that, we have another talk by Hana Ćurak. So I will just briefly introduce Hana as well. Hana is a researcher, writer, and producer. Her eclectic experience involves work in strategic communication, visual arts production, project management, and advocacy in Germany and Bosnia and Herzegovina. She's a founder of Sve su to vještice. It's all witches, it translates. An independent communication platform for the promotion of a feminist approach to security and radical democracy through digital tools and humor. Since its creation in 2015, this platform has established a new visual form of feminist communication that has been adopted by many activists across the region. Her talk will try to understand the process of cultural translation on the example of collages produced by the Sve su to vještice platform. So Hana, please join me. And this is it.
Thank you, Hana. Hi, everyone. Okay, so we have around half an hour, and today, like the concept that I thought, like the framework of the talk, would be a little thought experiment that I base on a 2006 text by a professor from the Angewandte, actually, Boris Buden. Before I start, maybe just a little bit about what actually the practice of Sve su to vještice is and how it fits into our today's topic. The platform itself started off as a meme page on Facebook before memes were a thing. So back, like, I mean, in the context of Bosnia and Herzegovina, for sure. So it's been going on for like 10, 11 years already that these memes are produced. The platform itself has all kinds of different elements. My practice is based in like co-productions, kind of like trying to produce collectivity through means that do not necessarily mean like collective work in a traditional sense. But for today's presentation, basically we're just focusing on this output that has to do with the memes. And in the publication, there's a couple of them that have been produced throughout the last 10 years. The memes always have this very, how to say, almost like a naive and kind of vulgar quality to itself. They usually thematize unpaid labor, emotional labor, housework, and other elements of gender relations that are applicable to different contexts, but are always also extremely local and very often in a language that we call Bosnian, Serbian, Croatian, Montenegrin, to an extent also Slovenian. So in the publication, also this little text that was written by vještice, by the platform, by this made-up collectivity, the collective body of Sve su to vještice, it talks a little bit about this, and it introduces the ways that the language is understood in the platform. So the memes are understandable to people who speak these languages. This one common language of former Yugoslavia that is more cultural than it is based in words and meaning. And today, and often when I try to talk about the practice in English or in German, it gets very tricky because we don't want to fall into, trying to explain our culture, and specifically not because the memes themselves just take out idioms that are patriarchal or chauvinist in nature, and therefore just translating them and trying to translate what the humoristic element of it also is in any other language would mean almost like a recolonizing process of the meaning. So today this is a thought experiment, but it's also kind of like a common exercise where I try to, from the departure point that is in the publication, I try to kind of open our thinking on where translation is actually located. So the text that I mentioned, you can find it online as well. It's called Cultural Translation, Why Do We Need It, I think. as I said, Boris Budin. And when I was Googling, another gimmick that I maybe should open with, when I was Googling the text, because I forgot the title, so I was like typing in Boris Budin, cultural translation, and then Google Translate showed up, and he translated his name as Keep Awake. And now, if you know Boris Budin, and if you know him, the way that he talks and the way that, like, what he's all about, it's kind of like, yeah, it definitely stands for something. This wrong translation that Google Translate imagined. And I sent it to him, and he was very delighted by this kind of compliment. But anyways, what he says in the text, and what I take today as the prompt for our thought experiment, is this quote. So neither the original nor the translation, neither the language of the original nor the language of the translation are fixed and persisting categories. They don't have essential quality and are constantly transformed in space and time. And exactly this little intervention by Google Translate kind of like illustrates what Budin is saying in this text. On many levels, this translation in itself doesn't mean much, but if you know the person, it starts meaning something. And also then we can add this element of that it's completely like a fault translation. It doesn't actually exist in the language, but it does exist in relation to the person somehow. So kind of all of that is very interesting. And this is where we, I guess, enter a semantic chaos in a way, because that's where the practice that I have is based. And to be able to talk about what Budin is talking about in this text, I decided to apply it to one specific meme from the Sve su to vještice platform. So, I mean, for example, in his text, he applies it to the German citizenship test, which is also very interesting, and it gives another layer of meaning and so on. And for today, for the practice, for my curatorial journalistic practice, it also makes sense, and I'll show you the meme first. So you have it now in this language that is the common language of the Yugoslav area. You have it in English and in German, so I'm sure everybody will find at least one that they understand. And if you can see it, in some images they are also mixed. So this one here says nije ni udata Maja, which means she's not even married. Of course she's not. Which means niemand vil die heiraten, na klar. But also outside of the language itself, the meaning of this what we get from the meaning from this idiom is also the same to all these three languages, and it's also the same if we just remove the language completely and if we just look at their faces. So back to the practice of Sve su to vještice, which kind of like presents itself as a feminist platform. What it does is that it takes these idioms from the everyday that are kind of chauvinistic or patriarchal or judgmental in nature, and it places them over an image that kind of also visually illustrates this moment in time when these things are being said. And here we have that to the audiences that consume this content online. This is perceived as humoristic. And this is frequently so in the context of Bosnian because it touches into a deeply personal experience. So what the audiences get from it, why this is funny to them is because most of the time it has either happened to them or they have been saying this. And what makes, what is banal about it is basically that while it is perceived as part of the everyday for all these people, once it becomes problematized by putting it on an image, and once it becomes problematized by you seeing it, it's almost like a reflection in the mirror that kind of makes a little bit fun of you. And while it's very difficult to explain, you know, or know why it's funny to people, like why things are funny to people, this is the closest I can get to kind of trying to culturally translate why there's a humoristic element to it. Now, if we translate this from the languages, from Bosnian, from the languages of the former Yugoslavia, if we translate it to English directly, it doesn't make much sense. And if we translate it to German as well, it doesn't function as such. So we have to play around a little bit with the language in order for it to actually function in those contexts as well. And sometimes some sayings, some idioms, some images from the reality of the everyday, from the culture where the page is based from, they don't make sense in other languages. But there's always a way to find, to kind of translate them without using just the means of the language themselves. But it doesn't have to do with language in itself either. It's not only about translation to different languages. It's also a translation of something that's beyond language and something that's deeper somewhere down there. And maybe that's a good moment to introduce what actually quote Buden on a few things. So in his text, he says, he starts from a very large context. He says, our societies and consequently our perception of the political reality are culturally framed. Oh, right, yeah. No panic. Yeah, it's like this alert. Yeah, test alert, yeah. Might take a while. How bizarre.
Just one more, maybe.
Can it be left? No.
There's probably no way to. Okay, little intervention. Okay, so back to Buden. So he says that our societies are consequently our perception of the political reality are culturally framed. This throws light on one of the most striking phenomena of the postmodern condition, the so-called cultural turn. Culture has not, as it is often believed, simply pushed away the notion of society from the political stage and taken its leading role in theoretical debates and practical concerns of political subjects. The change is more radical. Culture has become the very stage, the very condition of the possibility of society and of our perception of what political reality is today. This is the reason why democracy, that is the quest for freedom and equality, as well as the pursuit of social justice, welfare, etc., appear today as being culturally determined. It is in this context that the notion of translation, or more precisely of cultural translation, has gotten of immense importance. For it can be applied on both sides of the contradiction between essentialist and constructivist understanding of culture. That is, either in order to arrange relations between different cultures, or in order to subvert, as a sort of a reconstructed universalism, the very idea of an original cultural identity. In other words, the concept of cultural translation can be generally understood and applied in service of both contradictory paradigms of postmodern theory and postmodern political visions, multiculturalism and deconstruction. This is very important to make this distinction between multiculturalism, which is a trap of identitarian politics, and deconstruction, which is more of a broader field that we can intervene in. I will not go, deeply into Budin's critique of multiculturalism. He's very clear over that, and I think it's clear to all of us as well that it insists that translation can only be intercultural, and that since it just affirms the existence of nations. So, multiculturalism completely yields this kind of identity politics in which we all can agree to tolerate each other and learn from each other. And so other similar tropes that we see where they have brought us today. On the other hand, we have deconstructivism, which can be defined as the need to think about culture and about relations between different cultures beyond the idea of unique, essential cultural identities and communities originating in these identities. And here he introduces the notion of third space of translation. So somewhere that is, it's not defined whether it's between languages, something completely different, but it's not this exchange of translation that happens in a bilateral mode. It is this hybridity actually that yields. Oh no, it's me. How do you stop it? How did you stop it? Ah, okay. Who's next? Yeah, so this is this hybrid space where we find each other is a way to kind of it's a way for us to understand each other, basically, and it's a way for you, for example, if you don't speak my language, to actually understand the practice that it is based in. And this is kind of what I also try to do in the publication, where I wouldn't provide you with the direct translation of the meme, but we kind of try to contextualize it in a way that's, I believe, familiar to all of us, because we all have some kind of universal human experience. I'm playing around with more layers of translation, more layers of context, basically. While these two women look as like your, two average judgmental aunties, friends from your most conservative cousin or somebody looking at you. With ideas of what your life should be and should not be, actually, the actual image is of four very famous second wave American feminists on a conference. So it has nothing to do with the context that I put them in, and it can also be read as almost insulting to them. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because we can always share the information on who these women were and what they were doing, and taking them away from the only context that they knew they exist in doesn't do any harm to them in this way. then also we can also like go even beyond the image and try to problematize it even further. Like when this image, I saw it first time in Vogue, I think, and it's all over the internet as well. And it's always like this woman, this woman, this woman, and this woman at this conference. But who is the lady behind them who's like peeking over Gloria Steinem's shoulder? Like she's never mentioned in the description of the image, and she is obviously here. So with that question also, we kind of like, you know, like this interpretation of culture through language, interpretation of a moment through language. It's all kind of up there for discussion. And then to kind of like finish the talk before I give you two more examples that are very different from this one, I'll quote a little bit of Buden's text a bit more. So we stopped at opening this hybrid space of translation, which doesn't come from multiculturalism, but comes from this deconstructivist way of thinking. And what Buden does at this point, he like dwells a little bit about the third space and hybridity, and then he quotes Judith Butler, who also talks about these things. And Butler says, or Buden interprets that she says, for Butler, the fact that no culture can claim universal validity does not mean that there is nothing universal in the way we experience our world today. The universality, she means, has also become the problem of cross-cultural translation. It is an effect of exclusion and inclusion processes. Butler's formula is, universality can be articulated only in response to its own excluded outside. What has been excluded from the existing concept of universality puts this concept from its own outside under pressure, for it wants to be accepted and included into the concept. However, this couldn't happen unless the concept itself has changed as far as necessary to include the excluded. This pressure finally leads to a re-articulation of the existing concept of universality. This process by which the excluded within the universality is readmitted into the term is what Butler calls translation. Cultural translation, as a return of the excluded, is the only promoter of today's democracy. It pushes its limits, brings about social change, and opens new spaces of emancipation. It does so through the subversive practices which change everyday social relations. And so with that said, I will just kind of like go back to a more local context of the platform and in the ways that I kind of also think about including, excluding, creating this kind of collectivity that exists more ephemerally than in an institution itself. And it's the example of this meme, for example, which is also, I mean, it functions as any meme does in the world. But what happened, like a few months after I published it, is I got this image in my inbox. It's from somebody I don't know. She didn't say anything. She just sent me this image, and then we talked a little. And it turns out that she's a graffiti. I mean, she does graffitis in her free time, and she thought it would be a good idea to take the quote from the meme and put it in public space. She drew this. She drew the quote from the meme in one road that leads to Belgrade, and for this, it's, to me, this is great because it takes out the. It excludes vještice from the whole story, and this is where collectivity is then born, right? Because what I did is I took an idiom from a collective. So I took an idiom from something that's like it's something that's frequent, that everybody says, and so on. And I didn't appropriate it for myself because vještice are not like an institution that's clear on who is making it and so on. But it did become associated with this meme that I created. And then this creator taking it away from this visual context of my meme and putting it back into public space is doing what I actually try to do with the meme itself. So trying to using this specific affect mechanism pointing to a specific problem in society, which in this context is this guilt that women feel or are expected to feel by working and not spending time with their children. And then on top of all of this comes another image, and it's one of my older followers, and she just sent me this picture. She was like, I'm a mom coming back from work, can I stop to take the picture? So that kind of completes the cycle, and the way in which culture and language kind of move. But then also to leave everything open and this thought experiment open before I wrap up, there's some memes or some idioms that I say or imagine that once translated into any other language just kind of flop. And this is one of the examples of that. And I'll leave it like for discussion or ideas for those of you who know what it says, but also for those of you who want to kind of try and interpret it from the image and from all of this that I said. Yeah, and that's where I would leave it, maybe. Thank you. Thank you for participating in this thought experiment with me. Should I stay? Okay.
Actually, I would ask you guys to join us. So maybe we can have a short discussion. And we leave this meme here as a thought process for the audience. So first of all, thank you all for the really interesting talks and the perspectives that you bring to this conference. I think your practices are, of course, super different, but also somehow a bit similar, because in your work you all in a way deal with archiving, just maybe in kind of unusual ways. So I wanted to ask you what your perspective is on this practice of archiving itself. How do you understand the implications of archiving something? Of course, while you do it both in digital and physical space, and you deal with different kinds of material than Hana does. Hana, you do it in the space of social media, but also in the ways that you showed us in your talk. So what for you are these implications of archiving something? Maybe you guys can start.
Can you maybe rephrase the question a bit?
Yeah, of course. So I'm curious to know how you look at this practice, because you've mentioned, for example, that you archive both stuff from the 90s as well as very contemporary things. So what does this mean to archive maybe something that happened very recently, like COVID, and what are its implications? You know, what do you hope this archive will be or is right now?
Very difficult to answer. Well, when people ask about our archive, very often we say it's a platform. Like in the first place, it's a platform to talk about things. So basically, to claim culture back, to talk about culture as a queer culture, to go back and to take it something from the past, or to anchor in the past. So for us, it's more of like going and talking about things. It's less about collecting as such. But of course, to talk, you need to collect something, at least in your head. So you have to make these things, but have to publish something, because it's like, otherwise it's always in your head. Sometimes me and Viktorija will sit and then think, how did we talk last time? And so it's like you have to put these things down or remember them, like to go through them or to refer to them. So it's an important thing for that. But for us, in the first place, it's about talking, about claiming back, about referring to. So it's
or activating, making the topic of memory important in the community, because I guess in the queer context we always look into the future, not back, because it's important, to think, to imagine different worlds, better worlds, but there are a lot of things to look back to and to start from there. And I mentioned a little bit about different archives in Belarus or Russia, I guess, in the sense. Archiving queer memory is important for the future as well, like looking back and then thinking about future generations. That I remember when we were emailing with friends from Belarus, they used this phrase, when they started to look at queer history in their context, they said that they found this burnt ground where they had to dig again and again when there is a generation of activists that need to go to other countries, they need to find safer countries for their activism. Then generation after comes and they don't have nothing to build their own memory on. So it's important, I guess, from our perspective as from the activist point of view to put these traces everywhere, because we don't know what future brings us. And in Vienna, you know this perfectly well these days.
Thank you. And again, yours is a very different perspective, but in some way you also archive and you also build this, as you said, Viktorija, kind of a baseline, let's say, for conversation, but through these images and through these idioms and sayings.
Exactly. I think it's really important that you mentioned how important archives are for queer futures and queer futurity. And in a way, the practice, this is the common element of our practice. It's kind of like trying to archive something that has been either overlooked or ignored. In a way, in order to address it and be able to address it constantly and in the future as well. So yeah, the archiving that I'm doing is at the same time a longitudinal autoethnography, because it's always an exploration of what I'm saying, what is being said to me as well, but also what I hear is being repeated in all kinds of other contexts. And seeing it in letters is what gives it more materiality, which can then be used to, I guess, think about different futures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I wanted to relate also to something that you both have mentioned, which is language, of course, and something that we're dealing with today a lot. How do you think, so for example, Hana mentioned that this is, of course, in the beginning of your talk, you said that translating these kinds of idioms would be almost like colonization, in a sense, repeating. And I wanted to first also ask you, maybe if you can relate to this statement, and if for you it's important to keep this rooted in Lithuanian, maybe, or for example, you mentioned you do exhibitions with archival materials. Do you translate these, or do you usually keep it open for your community?
Well, when we started publishing this magazine, it was in the beginning. So the first 2 numbers were about archiving what has happened in terms of queer culture throughout the year in Lithuania. And it was in Lithuanian, and then we published this special issue on our archives. It was also in Lithuanian, and sometimes we have this problem of about when we, sharing, because I was, oh, it's in Lithuanian. It's like, it's such a shame. And for us, like, it's the first thing that we wanted to be like accessible in Lithuanian, and then to, it's not. It's nice to share with others what we're doing and to leave it in other archives as well, but in the first place we are functioning in Lithuania first of all, like in the region, but also like firstly in Lithuania, and to find ways how to approach words. Some words in Lithuanian it's a challenge, but. So sometimes we use queer, so like it goes out of somehow our context, but like what does it mean in our context as well? This word queer, which we don't have sort of this encompassing or this fluid. Kreivės actually is the word which we use. Like, so kreivės is the word which we took from we made it Lithuanian word, like referring to queer, kreivas, basically, which is not straight. So it's being used bit by bit, and you can see that it has different connotation than queer as such. But then not. Maybe we should rename our archive kreivas, kreivas archivas. But I'm not sure. Like, but it's something. So basically, it's a good question. How do you? It's a question for me. It's a good question that it's how do you refer to more universal things, but stay in your local context, and especially also with magazines and with stuff we're doing. So firstly, we do it in Lithuanian actually, but sometimes we, for instance, with this COVID archive, we did it in English because it was. We shared the content with others, so like it was a common. So we decided together to do it with other organizations. So like so we shared the content with others. So we had to know how we had to be able to share it. Sometimes we have to do it, I guess. But.
Yeah, maybe I will just add one sentence that. In a way, we're making the translation when we are taking some artists and we are showing them only from queer side. So we're translating into queer, I guess, commonly known big names who had, different triggering gender expression or sexuality. So in a way, queering is translating.
Yeah, for instance, like this photo of this Vilnius. For us, it is about, I don't know, association is with cruising for us. Like it's it's first one who has been documenting cruising for us. We don't know how it was, but so sort of we are translating it, but like yeah, so yeah, as you say, it's already some sort of play with the context and with translations. And yeah, so it's.
That's really interesting. I think you could also say that for the language of memes, no? That it's in a way already translating it into another sort of visual or Instagram language or something.
Absolutely. I guess language itself is just one of the ways to translate. It's easy, it's the easiest one we know, but I mean, even from our individual experiences, we know that we manage to kind of, communicate with other people, even if they're not speaking our language. And I guess memes, in a way, do that. I mean, through a bad image and through a lot of layers of cultural context, but also through universality that they have.
And this is also interesting to me, this concept of language and what we were talking about now, because you all don't just work in your local context, right? But also abroad and internationally. And I was curious if there's a difference for you in your international community or your local community, and if you have some interesting examples of that.
Maybe I can start. Definitely. So, not just international and at home, but also discipline-wise. For example, how do I? Okay, so Bosnia and Herzegovina, where I was based in for most of my life, is a country where culture and arts, because of its post-colonial condition, culture and arts are extremely associated with the non-governmental sector, which means that there's no national funding for culture and arts. It's all coming from donations and through projects through NGO sector, and this is the only way to kind of like fund art, which in itself is like a big topic and so on. But because this is so, and because I've never explicitly said that my practice is curatorial or artistic or so on, people perceive it often as an NGO in the Bosnian context, and they think that I'm a feminist NGO who deals with topics that concern girls. This is one way in which the page is perceived. Then another way in which I, as a young woman, am perceived through the page is that I'm the girl who does social media, which has brought me a lot of job opportunities in the social media management sector, which I'm absolutely uninterested in. And then you have Germans who absolutely have no idea what's going on, they don't understand it. But then, then when it comes to, for example, in the US, when I work in the US context, it also depends on where I'm talking about this. I gave a presentation a few years ago at the New School, where in the audience there were people who were kind of like, usually, like the New School is like this lefty school, blah, blah, blah. And they were like rolling their asses like off laughing. So they got the context. So I guess it depends. It doesn't have to do with language at that point at all. It just has to do with like where you're coming from and perceiving it, which is, it's been a very interesting road for me. And it's also I'm super grateful that, I don't know there's a word for this, but there's some witches that can take different shapes. And with my page, it's also like that. I can take different shapes with it, depending on who's perceiving it. And this makes the practice in as much like, consumable or able to penetrate areas where it wouldn't have otherwise. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like, as you said, in a local context where everyone understands the content, it's perceived as kind of different than abroad, where it's more immediately understood as this kind of cultural or even artistic context.
Yes. Yeah, exactly, because it's a familiar thing in the West, so to say. Yeah.
Do you have a similar experience, or?
It's similar, and also very similar, but also what, at least we spoke about it with Augustas as well, that in past years we felt that for foreign countries, our project sometimes is more interesting than in local, because in local context, like we work with and to queer communities. So like our our layer is a bit different, whether we talk to, I don't know, what kind of audience we talk to. Is it queer, or we need to, like, what kind of things we need to explain, like what kind of perspective we need to, do we need to talk a lot? Do we need to explain the event, or we just can directly go into certain topics that deals with not only Lithuania, but particularly queer community. So we are in Lithuania. I feel that we are, we are there, and we all can always be approached. And when like people know a bit more about us, we are invited, because also I think like the topic is popular right now, and like then you have to deal with this inner conflict. Do you go there because it's hot, do we want to talk to certain audiences or not? Do we want to talk to straight audience in general? So for us, I guess in queer archive context, this is what we deal with.
But not only like foreign, but like it's more, as you say, it's more of a, because we cooperate a lot with contemporary art like organizations, institutions, and then so it's also like how to translate it into this, I don't know, you cannot with straight language or whatever, like more normative language, I guess, from the things sometimes which you don't want to explain, and that's why it's nice to keep it in smaller settings, sometimes in, I don't know, at home, sort of, where you don't have to explain things, and then it's like, of course it's sometimes it's still perceived not as you want it to be perceived. Or for instance, we get less attention from the people which could get, interested, for whom it could be interesting. But sort of you keep it, it's for queer community. Sometimes this can be also there, it's for, but for, within the queer community, it's also sometimes too strange with things which we are doing. Like, it's maybe too artsy or something, it's too, can be too complicated to understand or something, to...
Yeah, why do you do culture, not advocacy? We don't have partnership law, but you are organizing exhibitions instead of standing with posters, demanding the equality of partnership.
Yeah, I get that a lot.
And it's that's a common thing, because like activism, it has to be activism if you do queer stuff. It's like that you first go and then you change the laws, and why, and first it's not.
And then be beautiful.
And for us, it's very important to define this smaller, much smaller field where we think we can be important and interesting, which is for us interesting. With festival as well, for 10 years with Vilnius Queer Festival, we tried different things, but like for the last maybe 4 or 5 years, we just settled, no, that's what we want to do. We want it to be interesting for us, and then like, whatever, like it's a curatorial, like more curatorial process, which is interesting for us, and then people will join anyway. Maybe less, maybe some, different people than you would, because in the beginning we tended to do much more, like wider events, invite more organizations, invite these advocacy organizations, and so on and so on. It's like it becomes just immense, and we are like largely underfunded, largely understaffed, and like understaffed when I say it's like it's not that we're getting paid or not getting paid a lot. So it's like it's just no people to do that. It's, and it's for us it's. And it's, but coming back a bit to your questions, is also that when we come to some countries, for instance, who have a lot of material in their own languages or languages they know, for them it's just like, it's like, how do you, it's a shame, it's like in this language. But how do we get to, for us, using like DeepL app to translate things is such a common thing. But for people who get this, everything has to be in English or German, and it's like, so it's nothing, it's too complicated to point, your phone and to read it. It's like, no, it's just like, no, I better leave it. So it's like, so, and then we get it quite a lot, and to take this additional effort, which we're so used to, like the translated not only from English and German, but like from various languages, and it's, you know, so it's where you are at. Yeah.
That's for sure a big similarity of our regions, I feel like, because we're very used to adapting. But I was curious if that was also the reason, and vice versa to you, Hana, if you could think that way for the Baltic region as well. If that was the reason, because you mentioned you were primarily interested in these Eastern European or ex-Yugoslavian states when you were kind of traveling and researching their queer archives. Did you already have this similarity of culture, of thinking in mind? Or why were you interested in this region specifically?
Post-socialism.
Yeah.
It's straightforward answer, I guess. Like, because, yeah, experience, more universal experience of the region, and yeah, periphery.
In between area, this which is usually, you know, like so Eastern European whatever studies how they were formed, and it's very relates to that. What is this region? You know, it's just like in between someone. It has a specific experience. So for us, it was important to refer to that, and then so many things can be unexplained. You know, like taken it's like, oh, we know that, and then it's like jokes, and also not only jokes, but like many things. You know, these even though, for instance, for us, you know, Slovenia, for instance, has this like much like, you know, different history, much richer history in terms of queer movement, or Poland, where homosexuality was not banned during socialism at all. So like, you know, it's these things which are, and of course it's different history. Of course they have much more to refer to. Some countries have much more to refer to, but some don't. So like.
Yeah, and also it's, I guess, a resistance to this monolithization of the region. Like all of us are the same, you know, Eastern Europeans who just come to steal jobs.
And I know that that's not necessarily what you research, this connection, but have you noticed some?
Well, I can just say maybe. So the post-socialist condition is, of course, extremely different for every country. But what is a universal state that we find ourselves in is the state of being in this constant transition. And while maybe 20 years ago it may have seemed that, you know, transition is a process which has an end, and that we are gleefully and joyfully going towards it. Now we know that there's no end to transition, and that it yields more and more conditions that are in its essence inhuman. And I guess that's what kind of can bring us together, and it's also maybe something where these kinds of like practices like ours emerge and understand each other. Yeah.
Really wonderfully put. And I'd like to take this opportunity to invite you, if you have any questions, to ask them now.
Or stay silent forever.
I don't know if it's really a question.
Okay, so I spent most of the summer in the Baltics, and I thought it was very interesting that in Riga at the National Art Museum there was the first queer exhibition, and then I went to Vilnius and I saw the sex exhibition at Mo Museum, and also in Latvia now same-sex partnerships are a legal thing, and we have a gay president, but somehow, I don't know, it was like not living in the Baltics anymore. It was like a very pleasant surprise, but then of course it's always, there is some kind of a backlash, and there is a part of society that still treats these topics as important, and there is this friction, of course, still in the public sphere. I don't know, I was just thinking that, yeah, how are you thinking about the Baltic region maybe specifically, because I don't actually know if I'm from Riga, I don't know if there's any queer archive initiatives, and I don't know, what do you see maybe yeah, like I don't really know. I don't have a question, I think, but I thought maybe somehow thinking also about this Baltic region as kind of also very at a very similar point with these things. I think also in this very cool context that okay, now it's cool to have exhibitions about queers and sex in nationally funded spaces. Yeah.
There are collaborations between Baltic states, definitely, and especially in arts. This exhibition in Mo Museum was curated by 3 curators that each one of them was like from different Baltic country, but there are also more grassroots collaborations. There are a network of queer curators and artists. There are also some initiatives in archiving, but they are a bit different. We met a person in Estonia who is making a queer collection in a little ethnographic museum by himself, just making shelves. He doesn't work there anymore, so I don't know what's the situation with the collection right now. And in Riga, actually, I guess academically, queer history is researched the most. There is this amazing finding of Alexandras Irbe diaries, where like there are like a lot of diaries that were found, and he was living through 3 different regimes. It was like interwar Soviet occupation and independent Latvia, so it's a fascinating thing that Latvia has, and we envy this. But there are like researchers in universities, and recently the issue was published on Baltic queer history that was made in Latvia's university. So.
Anyone else, maybe? Okay. Then I would just thank all of you, and thank you for the question. We take a short break now, but I would just remind you that also in the publication there's a really nice conversation between Viktorija and Augustas about the Išgirsti archive, and a very nice walkthrough through memes such as this one by Hana Ćurak. So have a look, and we start soon with our second half of the program. Thank you.